This is in August, middle of August in 2018. I'm Dr. John Bakos, and we run a weight loss clinic here, which I've been for since 2011. Prior to that, I was in general practice and in anesthesiology also. I've discovered in medicine, nutrition has always been considered to be a social problem. But since I've been in this weight loss clinic, it's become quite apparent that there is a lot connected with what we eat and our stages of health later in life. And we do concentrate on weight loss, but we also have incorporated the information on cholesterol as well as on proteins. We start off generally with sugar and refined sugars. To make the short topic to start with, the sugar and the cholesterol and the protein are the three that we do concentrate on. Of course, we have to get the weight for the people, and we have a scale which can read us off our basal metabolic rate, which gives us a guide on how much calories we should eat in order to lose weight. We like to lose about a pound a week, and that requires cutting our calories by 500 a day from what our basal rate is. And with the idea that fat has a calorie count of about 3,500 calories per pound. So 1 week is a pound a week, is what we're aiming for. The first thing to find out with most people in this country, which is, are we eating much sugar? Sugar is a very, very widespread use in our country and has some critical problems that derive from sugar that are not detectable in many ways for quite some few years. When it finally becomes apparent, there's damages starting to show up and occur. That led me to the saying of eat the sweets, lose the feats. So that is a nice end result that comes out of winding up with diabetes, which is coming from, almost always is coming from eating too much refined sugars in our diet. The second thing I talk about is cholesterol. And cholesterol has not have very much to do with weight, but it has to do with life. The average cholesterol in our country is about 200, and that is associated with a 50% mortality rate, heart attacks and strokes. If we can get our blood cholesterol level down below 150, the new normal, in what I've come to believe and find out, the new normal is 90 to 140. If we can get down into that range, then our cause of death from heart attacks and strokes is almost entirely eliminated, which means we get some 20 to 40 more years added onto our lifespan. And our lifespan now is around 79 years of age. So that would put us up into the hundreds and still be in very good health in general terms. The third thing that I talk about is protein. And I think we're massively overloading ourselves with protein. And there are two major causes that come from eating too much protein. And one being gout, which is a severe arthritis feature. The second is its connection with the autoimmune diseases. The immune system requires protein to do its job, and its job is to attack and kill intruders, such as bacteria and viruses. And that is a perfect system for taking care of that. The problem is if we eat too much protein, now that protein is going to feed what I call our junkyard dog, which is inside us, which is our immune system. It is there to fight and kill. And it's designed primarily to take care of intruders such as bacteria and virus. But if we get too much protein in, and there are no intruders that immune system has to deal with, then we can see that we start attacking our own body and body parts by the immune system. So that's the kind of the long story short. To talk about go back to the sugar. The refined sugars are a recent addition to our diet. Probably around the 1900s is when it first showed into our diet. Somebody found if they cut their sugar cane into chunks and threw it in a vat of boiling water, they could get the sugar out of that sugar cane. They'd fork the woody part away and dry the remaining sugar down to concentrated bulk packages. And it turned out people liked that and bought it. And of course the sugar cane guy says, maybe I better plant some more of this sugar cane. I might be able to make a living at this. So it did get into our diet pretty easily, starting in the 1900 range. But it took a couple generations before we began to see damage showing up that we'd never seen before. Things like black toes getting gangrene and having to amputate the toes and the feet and the leg up to the knee. People going blind for no good reason or losing their kidney function. Even the brain has been noticed to be shrinking on X-ray. So the sugar has multiple effects on our body that are very, very horrendous. The insulin cells made by the beta cells in the pancreas are designed to take any extra sugar that we get from our digestive process and store it in the fat cells. And that is a self-preservation or a preservation function that allowed people to get through famines, which were not too uncommon in the previous years or years ago. Trouble is now we don't have any more famines, but we still have a very effective storage mechanism for this extra sugar. Sugar is an important molecule. It's a fuel for our body cells, muscles, and nerve, and the rest of our body. But if we have extra sugar, then the body has figured out that it can store sugar in fat. And that way those people that were able to store that fat were able to survive those famines. The people that couldn't store the fat as well as they needed were the ones that tended to die. So we are all basically descendants of people that have been able to survive famines. And that means we are storing that sugar into fat very readily. The muscles and the nerve system can take sugar out of the bloodstream and burn it as it needs it. It does not need help from the insulin. The insulin is there to help that sugar get stored, the extra sugar. After we eat, the food is digested, and within 2 hours it peaks, usually in the 120s, and then it drifts back down again. That is a normal arrangement. If we eat refined sugar, we're winding up getting our sugar levels too high and causing insulin cells to have to work too hard. And to make it in a simple, understandable method that I can understand also, it's causing those insulin cells to work too hard. And they can become exhausted, and in that point they can start to die. And when they do, they cannot produce enough insulin. Finally, there's not enough to take care of this extra sugar. So now the sugar winds up rising in the bloodstream. It looks around and says, well, if you're not going to put me in the fat cells, then I guess I'll go find a place to go myself. And where it's picked is little tiny end arteries of the arterial tree of the body, and it starts plugging them up. There are different mechanisms and theories and studies that have shown a more scientific approach, but this works well for me to be able to explain. In that event, now the parts of the body that require the good circulation and the normal levels of sugar are faced with increased levels of sugar. And I think the easiest way to explain it is that the little tiny end arteries of the artery of the body start to plug up. And then the parts of the body that need that blood and the oxygen and nutrients can't get it. And that's where we start getting gangrene of the toes and the feet and so forth. The amputations seem to end by the time we get up to the knee. But if you find people in the rest homes or convalescent hospitals, It's not uncommon to see people with under the covers just a stump on their leg. The foot is gone. And almost always the missing feet are come because of diabetes. So that is basically, it also causes blindness in the eye vision. The kidneys can be damaged from the sugar, and we can lose our kidney function. The brain actually tends to shrink, which we've noticed that on x-rays as time through the years, that sugar can cause damage for that, and to that extent. For some reason, it doesn't seem to do anything to the hands or arms, and nobody knows why. But in general, sugar is quite a nice poison. It's a nice tasting poison. And it comes from, some will come from sugar cane. And in order to find out how much sugar we might have been able to eat in a natural state, we talk to people that have grown up with sugar cane in the area. And I always ask them, how much sugar cane can you eat in the raw state? And as far as inches of cane sugar stalk, it's usually in the range of a few inches, 3, 4, 5 inches. They can chew that a little bit to get the flavor out of it, then they throw the woody part away, and they don't eat any more. But I've been told that it takes 35 feet of sugar cane to make 1 teaspoon of refined sugar. So I can see, and it's easy to see, it would have been difficult to overeat sugar in order to challenge the body to decide what to do with it before we figured out how to refine it and concentrate it. Once we found that out, then it got into our diet, and people accepted it readily. And it became a centerpiece of our celebrations, holidays, birthdays, Halloween, we say trick or treat. Probably it should be more accurate to say trick or poison. The damage that happens from that extra sugar is, like I said, is horrendous. The late stage damage that is coming from that sugar is enough for doctors to make entire careers out of taking care of, trying to treat. But before then, that was very unusual to have people show up with diabetes. They used to urinate outside in the outside area, and people could see if the flies went to some sugar, to some urine, that was the one that had the sugar in it. You could get a diagnosis of diabetes by watching what the flies did. Of course, that was of historical interest. So I say, if you have extra sugar, throw it out in the back field and let the species that like sugar go eat it, like the ants and the bees and the flies. Don't have it in the house, because it's a sort of an addicting type of poison. It had another use for helping children to become socialized, to join the human race, so to speak. When they're children misbehaving, the parents would tend to say, go out, pick some switch and bring it in, and we'll correct your bad behavior. So it was a bit traumatic, but that worked. But when sugar came along, we didn't need switches anymore, because now we learned that we could bribe the children to behave and do the right thing and reward them. And that put the effect of sugar into the category of being a treat. And this is a battle for everybody to kind of fight as they get older. And as we found out the damage that sugar can cause or will cause, it's another added element that we have to sort of get out of our brain. And once we understand that it is damaging to the body, it makes it a lot easier to kick the habit, so to speak. So that's basically the sugar. The other part of the sugar is the artificial sweeteners that we're using now. Basically, we are the guinea pigs for the next generations, because we don't really know what the body's reaction is going to be to the artificial sweeteners. Also, the sugar that's in fruits and berries is okay. That sugar is has a fair amount of it is fructose, and fructose has a different metabolic pathway. It does not need insulin to take care of it. So as it goes into the system, it finds its way out some other way. There's another metabolic pathway, and additionally, it it's probably almost twice as sweet as the cane sugar type. So we don't need as much of it to get a sweet taste. The other benefit from fruits and berries is it has pulp. The fiber and pulp that's in the fruits and berries stays in the intestinal tract. And while it's there, it's trapping that sugar that's in the berries and fruits and keeping it from going into the bloodstream so fast. This means it's acting like a bodyguard for the beta cells, the insulin cells, where the insulin is being formed. So it does not have to work so hard. I've talked to people that have diabetes where they have testing their blood sugar 5 times a day, and asked them if there are any fruits or berries that can cause them to use more insulin or need more insulin. And the general answer is no, they don't know of any except for maybe a couple. The one that people have mentioned that has extra sugar in it is the sweet mangoes, and the other one is sometimes can be the over or very ripe nectarines, but even that is not too damaging or too hard for the body to handle if we don't have diabetes. So that's basically the sugar side of the equation, which brings us to cholesterol. Cholesterol is a critically important molecule for the body. Every cell in our body is wrapped in a membrane, and part of that membrane is cholesterol. The cholesterol, all the cholesterol we need, is made by our liver, and the normal range for that cholesterol is 90 to 140. This is a new range for generally known ranges. It used to be felt that cholesterol of 250 was all right. Then it was 220, and then it was 200. Now it's down to 180, but I think it's going to have to go in lower than that. There's a study done in a small town, used to be a small town 30 miles west of Boston, which is named Framingham. And they have what they call the Framingham study, which started after World War II, where the doctors and the people in town got together to see if there was any connection with their health and future life connected with the foods that they were eating. And they've been tabulating everything that they could about themselves and the people as far as the nutrition, the foods they ate, their general health, their exercise, their habits, such as smoking, etc., and then their illnesses and blood tests if they could get them. And this has been going on for almost 70 years, maybe a little more. But here just a few years ago, they had a sidebar that came out that said, well, looky here, if we have less than 150 in our cholesterol, blood cholesterol level, we don't see any heart attacks and strokes. But at a 200 level, we're seeing 50% of people dying too soon because of heart attacks and strokes. And so the correlation seems to be very direct. The component parts have been tried to be associated with some way to benefit it, including taking medications. But that is probably not the best way to get the cholesterol down. We want to get our cholesterol down into the normal range. The liver makes all that we need, and its range is 90 to 140. And it's used, as I say, to hold cells together. It's part of the membrane that holds all our cells together. It's also important in the brain for insulation so we don't short circuit the nerves. It has another use, which is also when the sunlight hits the skin, the blood vessels carrying the cholesterol underneath the skin are conformed or changed to vitamin D. So that's a nice use for cholesterol for the body. And it would take somewhere between 30 minutes to an hour in a week of sunlight exposure to produce the vitamin D that we need. The fourth use of it is when it goes out in the bile, and it helps for digestion. But down the line in the intestinal tract are little tubules that recollect every bit of cholesterol they can and get it back in the bloodstream. And those tubules have not been known to be present for, except for the last maybe 15 years or thereabouts. But they're very efficient in recollecting all the cholesterol they can. And they don't care where that cholesterol is coming from, what the liver's been making and coming out in the bile, or from what we've been eating. If we eat cholesterol, that's going to get absorbed into our body too. And the foods, well, let's see, what can I say? The foods that have high cholesterol in it, or have cholesterol in it, are the highest source is egg yolks. And the next source is shellfish, shrimp, lobster, and crab. The third source is lean meats. This is quite a shocker for everybody to come to realize. It is the leaner the meat, the higher the cholesterol. The next one down is the beef and pork, which has fat in it. That white fat that we see, the white soft fat, is actually a fuel. It can be burned by the metabolism of the body. Whereas cholesterol is not a fuel. It cannot be burned by the cholesterol. It's a structural molecule, as we can see, where it's holding our cells together. We don't want to burn it up. Even if we could burn it up, we still wouldn't want to. Or we'd be springing leaks in all our cells of our body, and we'd be a puddle on the floor. So so that's the need for cholesterol, and the source of it, the next source down is milk. The fat that's in milk, a lot of it's cholesterol, and that's used to make cheese. So the cholesterol in our diet comes from egg yolks and cheese and everything in between that moves itself. It swims or flies or runs or jumps or crawls, has cholesterol helping to wrap its cells together. And when we eat that, we're getting that cholesterol into our body, and it gets into our body with those little tubules to help recollect it. And the body has no way to get rid of that cholesterol in a normally fashion when it's above that 140, 150 level. So where does it go? The first, where it goes is into the walls of the arteries of the body, and it starts clogging up those arteries. The first that I ever saw in my career that had to do with cholesterol was when I was in third year medical school. And it was my turn to rotate through pathology, where they do autopsies. So I went to the morgue, and there laying on a slab was a gentleman 49 years old, looked like the picture of health. He was tan, you could see muscle definition in his arms and legs, and calluses on his hands. He was a hard-working farmer from central Ohio, laying there dead, 49 years old. It was a very shocking thing for me to see. It was my first experience there. But the pathologist doctor said we were opening him up to look around and see if we can find out what the cause of his death was. So they went down through the abdomen and found the aorta. The aorta normally is the big artery in the body, which is about the size of a nickel. And the wall of it is maybe 4 or 5 pieces of paper thick. It's not real thick, it's tough. This gentleman's aorta was 3 times that size. It was much enlarged. So they cut it lengthwise and laid it apart. The wall of that aorta was over 1/2 inch thick, filled with greasy yellow cholesterol, which was shocking to me. The inside lumen had been squeezed down, so the blood was having more trouble getting through the blood vessels because that the cholesterol being deposited in the walls of the arteries. And so I'm sure that patient had high blood pressure also. But I was so shocked and stunned to see that aorta that I didn't even remember what the rest of it. I don't even know why that patient died. I think it was a heart attack. But the sight of that aorta has stuck with me, and even now I can see it in my mind's eye as though it was yesterday. So that is where cholesterol does go, into the walls of the arteries. The treatment as we normally hear it from most of the medical doctors, and I was the same opinions some years ago, what to do about this high cholesterol. And the idea was to, and I still hear this on almost every patient that comes in for weight loss, to follow these steps. Number 1 is to eat more healthy, meaning more plant-based, without exactly saying where the cholesterol is coming from. The second thing was to get more exercise. And exercise is a good thing, but if we have clogging of our arteries from that cholesterol, and we exercise, it can kill us. The third thing, if that all doesn't help enough, is to take a statin, which is one of probably the most highly prescribed medicines in the country. And what it does, it's a poison to the liver. It blocks the production of cholesterol by the liver. And we can get the cholesterol down with that, but we can still see heart attacks even though we take that. There are several different companies that make statins. So they travel under different names like simvastatin, lovastatin, and et cetera. So to me, that's a secondary method. The advice to get exercise is also problematic. For instance, we had a marathon run here in the Folsom area about 3-4 years ago or so, when a marathon runner dropped dead from a heart attack. And now I'm saying, who is more fit than a marathon runner? What in the heck are they doing having a heart attack? Not just a few months ago, we had a coach at Lincoln High School, just north of Sacramento area, that was out helping the football players try to get in shape with running. And as he was running along, he's 39 years old. And the young man running alongside him, student that was running alongside him, said his last words, that coach's last words, were, "I can't breathe." And he fell dead on the ground. They tried to resuscitate him, but it didn't work. They couldn't get him back. 3 little kids he had. And that is tragic. The morning of that day, that coach had no idea whatsoever that it was his last day and that he was going to die while trying to help his students. We see the same thing where it snows, like in the east where they have to go out and shovel snow. And it's not uncommon to hear guys dropping dead while shoveling snow. So, and it's still going on. So that means the heart is needing more oxygen when they do the extra work. And it can't get it because those little arteries going to the heart muscles are clogged up from cholesterol. And the heart goes from beating to fibrillating. Now everybody's got 1 or 2 minutes of life left. And it's still going on back there. I've talked to people that live back there, like in Detroit. I actually have a sister in Detroit. And she says they still are having reports of people shoveling snow and dropping dead with it. That's another case where those people felt perfectly normal, or they wouldn't have gone out to shovel snow. And yet lying within them is a deadly collection of cholesterol that's there to wind up killing them. So I kind of liken cholesterol to being like a lion in a zoo. It's in a cage. As long as it's inside its cage, everything's fine. People can watch it eat, move, and sleep, and do things. But if somebody opens that cage door and that lion walks out, then that means people are going to be dying. And that's the way cholesterol works. It looks perfectly normal in its cage, and that's where it should be. But when it gets out and goes up in its levels, that's when people start to die. The cholesterol comes in different component parts. There's an LDL and an HDL, and it's been desperate, evidence and investigation to see what to do about all this cholesterol if they can't be helped. And they have come to find that there is an increased tendency for the LDL, the low-density lipoprotein part of the cholesterol, to be transferred or get through the endothelial lining pores of the inside lining of the arteries to go out into the wall of the arteries. In the wall, it causes irritation, inflammation, and scarring, and later down the road, calcium comes in. So that's kind of the natural history, of course, of cholesterol in our arteries. And it does nothing but cause serious problems from it. And I say if we get the total cholesterol down to 140 or less, the component parts go with it. We do not have to worry about the LDL and HDL because it's going to be in a normal range, which normal now is a new normal. So then a couple other things that I've been made aware of, that this cholesterol starts depositing in the walls of the arteries in the teenage years. 18 and 19-year-old young men that go into the military, and they do a lot of good heavy exercise, walking and hiking and hauling heavy packs, and go into battle like Korea and Vietnam. Some got killed. They did autopsies on them, and they come to find yellow deposits of cholesterol on the walls of their arteries already at the age of 18. And I think even sooner than some people are claiming. But it takes about 20 to 30 years for the cholesterol to clog up enough in the arteries to where by the 40s, the incident of heart attacks begin to show up in the men. They start getting the heart attacks in the 40s. The ladies have a 10-year reprieve. They start getting their heart attacks in the 50s. And I think the reason for that, the difference is that the ladies have losing cells monthly with their periods. And that means the body has to rebuild those cells, and it needs cholesterol to rebuild them. So it constitutes another use for cholesterol that the ladies have and the men don't. And that's good for 10 more years of life for the ladies. But once that menstruation stops, then the ladies start clogging up and they start getting their heart attacks. The cholesterol level can go very high, up to 300-400 level, with pregnancies and with nursing for babies. The babies can't make the cholesterol that they need in their livers yet, so they have to get it from what their mama eats. And that way the lady's metabolism runs the cholesterol up for those babies can do their growing. So there is one evidence that I think indicates that we may be able to reabsorb that cholesterol out of the body if we get it down low enough. And that comes also from World War II, the concentration camps where people went to skin and bone and then died, and they did autopsies on them. And they found quite a bit that the arteries in those people were clean, and they should have had clogging because they did have heart attacks back then. But here they are clean. That means that if the body needs cholesterol, it needs it in a very important fashion. It'll go get it from wherever it can. And if it does have it stored up in the arteries by accident, or by design, I guess you could say, then it may be that it'll pull some of that cholesterol back out of those arteries. According to my diet, including not eating the cholesterol, there's another side of benefit that we can get from the food we eat that will help to drag the bile out. And in the bile is cholesterol. So there are 5 foods that I've been able to identify that I believe can help pull the cholesterol out, but they have to be uncooked. They have to be raw. They include apples and cabbage, like in coleslaw, cucumbers, like in sandwiches or salads, and onions and garlic. There's a common molecule in 4 of those, and I'm not sure about the apples, but the 4 of them have an isothiocyan group, and that is susceptible to be damaged or inactivated by heat. So if you cook it, then you don't get that cholesterol drawing benefit. But if it's eaten raw, then it will definitely help pull some of that cholesterol out through the bile. And I believe it gloms onto that cholesterol and drives it past those tubules so they can't recollect it. The one patient I had was a 32-year-old gentleman with 177 cholesterol. And he followed my diet, the no cholesterol diet, plus those foods that can help a bit to bring it out. And in 1 month, we rechecked his cholesterol again, and he was at 115. That was with no pills and no added exercise. Another gentleman was a 50-year-old that was trying to do training for a half marathon, and his cholesterol was 270. So he was, I told him this, and he was alarmed, and I thought we should get his cholesterol down as fast as he can, because he asked me what did I think about his exercise for his half marathon. And I said, I think you're lucky. You're getting away with that much, and probably should not do any more exercise than what you're doing. But in the meantime, get your cholesterol down as fast as you can. And I did have some 3-year out-of-date samples of a cholesterol-lowering medicine, which include a statin and also Zetia, which is one that blocks those little tubules so they can't recollect the cholesterol. And he took one a day for 11 days. He came back in for another blood test of other type. And I said, while you're getting that, why don't you get your cholesterol and see what it's doing? So he did. and his cholesterol after 11 days, and unfortunately or fortunately, I gave him those pills as samples, and there were three, like I say, they were 3 years out of date, but he took them one a day, and 11 days after he started his diet program, plus those pills, he was at 114. That's the fastest I've ever seen anybody get their cholesterol down. And that's proof that it can be gotten down readily and easily. The whole secret is to don't eat it. So that leaves us with other foods to eat in the vegetable matter. And that's kind of the cholesterol story as I see it. The third thing I try to cover is the protein. And protein, we're getting a massive overload of protein in our diet these days. And we're seeing two things, at least two things, that are not good that come from this extra protein. One of them, in the process of eating protein, we have a breakdown process going on that gets broken down, winds up as urea. And urea is a very soluble waste, nitrogen waste product. It's soluble in blood and water, and we can get it through the kidneys, get rid of it really easily. But if we eat too much protein, there's a weak link in that process. And when that gets overworked, it starts to fail. And then instead of going all the way down to urea, it starts coming out as uric acid. And uric acid now is circulating around in the bloodstream. And it's not very soluble. If it tries to get out the kidneys, it can hurt the kidneys. But if it finds a cool spot somewhere, like in the body, somewhere a cool spot, where it seems to go classically, the first place is like the big toe. Now we get a big, hot, painful, red, swollen toe, and we limp into a doctor and say, what in the world is going on with my toe? And the doctor says, that looks like gout. The best thing to do for that is cut back on the protein. So that's one bad thing. I did have, early in my career, as a general practice, I had a patient that came in with that early, and it looked like an abscess to me. I thought, well, we better drain it. So I numbed it and opened it up, and out came crystals. It looked like bigger salt, bigger sized crystals than salt. It almost looked like a mesh of broken glass, but it was uric acid. And that's why we get these painful storage areas for the uric acid. And that comes from too much protein. And we're starting to see that gout is what that's called, is gout. We're starting to see that in younger and younger people. And also, if we keep eating the protein, it'll start spreading and going into other joints. Then it becomes very painful to move around. So that's one bad thing from protein. But the thing that is even worse is its connection with the immune system. Our immune system is like a junkyard dog. It's there to fight, and it's there to kill intruders like bacteria and virus. Nobody knows exactly how it happens. So my story is, I say, that they're scouts looking for intruders. And they see a bacteria come in, and they say, hey, you're an intruder. I'm taking a coat off your cell wall, and I'm going back and tell the boss, and we're going to come back and we're going to kill you. The bacteria says, oh yeah, give it a try. So out comes antibodies from the immune system. The immune system says, good, we got the coat off the wall, that bacteria, I'm incorporating this antibody, which are immunoglobulins, or the bigger size protein, with that code. It sends it out, attaches to the wall of the bacteria, and blows it up and kills it. That's just perfect. It does the same thing with virus. That's exactly what we want our immune system to do. But if we have extra protein, now that can encourage the immune system to fight more things that we don't want it to fight. So it's the junkyard dog in us that's like the immune system says, grr, give me meat. We want to fight. We need meat to make our ammunition. I call them bullets. So out come the scouts, and they say, okay, well, we'll just keep looking. So they go look in the throat. There's a thyroid. Thyroid, I think you're an intruder. We're going to take the coat off your membrane and go back and tell the boss, and we'll be back and we're going to kill you. The thyroid says, what'd I do? Never mind, that's our job. So it goes back and tells the boss, hey, we got a whole bunch of them over there in the neck. Here's the code, go get them. So out come the immunoglobulins, attack the thyroid cells and start blowing them up and kill them, just like it's an intruder. Little by little, this thyroid is being destroyed, and we lose the function and ability to make thyroid. Luckily, we found another source. We can take thyroid in pills and replace what we're losing. And as that thyroid destroys that, as the thyroid is being destroyed, which finally will be dead and gone, and it's never coming back once the immune system's done with it, then we can replace it with the pill at least and live out a fairly normal life. That condition has a name. It's an autoimmune disease. It's called Hashimoto's. And it's not that uncommon. We see that from pretty off and on, not too uncommonly. But the boss says, good job, guys, but we still got more protein here, so go find more intruders. So, okay, we'll go look. And they go out and look inside the cells. And there's a nucleus. The nucleus, you're an intruder, the scouts say. We're taking the coat off your membrane. We're telling the boss, and we'll be back, and we're going to kill you. And the nucleus says, why? What did I do? Never mind, that's our job. So out come the antibodies, and we can test those in the blood. They're called ANA, anti-nuclear antibodies. It's a blood test that we can order for that. And if that's positive, that means our immune system is now recognizing the nucleus of the cells of our body as being intruders. That is a fatal disease. Its name is called lupus. So when we get that, that is a tough one to deal with. First of all, it's kind of hard to make a diagnosis. But once we do, the treatment for it is, they did find a treatment for this condition. And the treatment is poison to knock the immune system down, like Imuran or methotrexate or higher dose of cortisone. And that will knock that immune system down so that it can't fight so hard. So we can delay the effects of that lupus. Unfortunately, those poisons will hurt other cells in the body also. So we really have to walk a tightrope. The blood test and adjusting medicine doses, doctor's visit. And so we can lengthen that person's life, but it's still going to be shortened compared to what it would have been normally. So that's a second autoimmune disease. There are something like 70 different autoimmune diseases that have been identified so far. If it affects, for instance, they'll advertise on TV commercials the condition called Crohn's disease, which is small intestine irritation. That is an autoimmune disease. They have medicines for that. There are some new medicines coming along that may be better to use than the poisons that we've had to use prior to now. That's another autoimmune disease. If it attacks the skin, it's called psoriasis. If it attacks nerve cells, it can be multiple sclerosis. If it attacks the muscles, it's fibromyalgia. If it attacks the joints, it's arthritis. So there are numerous areas. Every area of the body is susceptible to being attacked by our own immune system. And I can't think of any development or etiology or benefit from our immune system attacking its own neighbors in our own body. So I'm thinking that it must be that we're eating too much protein, which is what the fuel is that the immune system needs to attack. And the safe amount, for my determination of what we can eat of protein safely, is in the neighborhood of 10 grams a day. The way I discovered that, or decided that, is thinking that the immune system is needing protein to do its job. Then what is the item in the human that needs the most protein in a normal fashion? And I've asked this question of a dozen of people that I've told this story to, and nobody's guessed it. So I give you a minute to think about it, see if you can guess what the item in the human is that needs the most protein. The things that have been guessed have been like the hair, the skin, the brain, the muscles, the liver. And I say, no, none of those. That's not the highest use. So when I say what I think is the highest use, everybody says, oh, of course, I knew that. The thing that I think is needing the most protein in our human existence are babies. And the baby in the uterus is an example of needing that protein. It's going to gain 6-8 pounds average in 9 months, along with 3 or 4 pounds of placenta. So that's going to be a gain of like 10 pounds in 9 months. Most of that actually is in the last 5 months. So 5 months into 10 pounds is 2 pounds a month. That's like a half a pound a week that baby is growing. And the half a pound translated into foods would be like 2 quarter pounders a week that mama has to eat to help that baby do its growing. So now when the baby's born, it's going to be down to 1 pound, like 15 pounds in the first year. That's closer to like 1 pound a month, which is in the range of 1/4 of a pound a week. So that's like 1 quarter pounder, just quantity size, that child needs to do its growing. And as it grows, finally becomes full-size adult. Now it doesn't grow anymore. It's not growing anymore. It does not need any more extra protein. So now how much does that baby need? And according to my calculations, I'm making a guess, and I think it may be a little generous, but I think it's somewhere in the range of 1/4 pounder a week. I'm sorry, 1/4 pounder every 2 weeks. That's 4 ounces, which is 2 ounces a week. And each ounce is about 30 grams, so that's 60 grams a week, which translates down to about 10 grams a day. And that's how I came to the amount of protein that would appear to me to be the safest amount. The muscle building crowd says we need extra protein. But what happens when somebody builds their muscles up with exercise to a nice, big, strong level? Oftentimes we can see the blood vessels under the skin enlarge. And so my question is, what happens when that person quits exercising for a week or 2? Those muscles tend to shrink down. That can't be protein. Protein can't be lost that fast. And those big and dilated blood vessels also kind of go away. So I think a lot of the enlargement of our muscles from exercise is actually the increased requirement for blood, oxygen, and nutrients that the muscles need to do their work. So that is kind of my thinking. So then what is, the next question is, how much protein we got? So it's 10 grams a day maybe. What is the item in our diet that we can eat that has the nutrition that we need? And the thing that comes to mind and seems to be the best solution are seeds, whatever sprouts. If a seed has to sprout, wants to sprout, it has to have the necessary vitamins, minerals, and amino acids in order for it to sprout. And it turns out those are exactly the same things that we need. So that would fall in a category of legumes like beans, peas, lentils, and an example of a nation that is basically vegetarian are the Hindu Indians. And the Hindu Indians, so I'm told, their staple is pea soup and lentil soup. And there's 1.5 billion of those folks. So that must be pretty good nutrition. The Orientals are tending to eat the rice and soybeans and have for centuries. So and there's 1 billion or more of those folks. So that must be pretty good nutrition. If they happen to live around the coast, they might get some fish or some protein, but otherwise they apparently tend to eat on the vegetarian side of things. The other thing that that has been widely known is that wheat has been considered to be the staff of life. So it must be good nutrition for them. It's also in the skin of potatoes. The skin, when you leave it let sit too long in the pantry, will begin to sprout all around it, which means there's germination sites all around the skin of the potatoes. And so that means that that's where all this basic nutrition that we need is located in those potatoes. In purposes of weight loss, we recommend not to eat too much of this inside part, the starchy part. There probably is good nutrition there, but it's got more calories that we need. So that's basically my take on nutrition. And it's actually taken me some 50 years in medicine to come to final realizations of some fallacies we have in common knowledge, as well as the elements of nutrition itself. Thank you. This is